It was a typical Thursday evening, when everything in my life changed. The sun had already dipped behind the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the apartment. Ethan, my husband of 8 years, was late as usual. He worked long hours as a marketing executive, often staying later than necessary to finish projects. I used to be understanding about it, but over time, the late nights began to feel like more than just work. But I never questioned him. I trusted him. I loved him. We had built a life together. Our small but cozy apartment in the city, our shared weekends spent at the farmer's market or taking long walks in the park, our quiet nights in front of the television. We were a couple who looked perfect on paper. I believed we were happy, or at least I thought I was. But that evening, as I prepared a simple dinner for us both, nothing fancy, just grilled chicken and a salad, I felt an unshakable sense of unease. Maybe it was the way the day had gone, or maybe it was just the endless string of late nights Ethan had been pulling. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something was off. I stood in the kitchen, chopping tomatoes for the salad, when I heard the sound of the front door opening. Ethan was home. I felt a wave of relief, eager to see him after a long day. But as I turned around to greet him, something caught my eye. A phone. Ethan had left his phone in the car. This wasn't unusual. He often forgot it in the car when he was rushing to get in. But tonight something felt different. Maybe it was because of the nagging feeling that had been following me all day. Or maybe it was just pure curiosity. But for some reason I decided to check his phone. I wasn't the type of person to go through my husband's things. Ethan had never given me a reason to doubt him, and I had always believed in mutual trust and respect in our relationship. But that night, as I stood in the hallway, looking at the phone resting on the table, an invisible pull seemed to be drawing me to it. I picked it up cautiously, unsure of what I was about to find. The phone was unlocked, and I immediately noticed a text message notification on the screen. The sender's name read Claire, and the preview of the message was enough to make my heart skip a beat. It was affectionate, something I'd never seen in a message between Ethan and anyone else. I miss you, babe. The kids are asking about you. When are you coming over? My breath caught in my throat. I froze for a moment, staring at the screen. Who was Claire? I didn't recognize the name. There were no other messages from her. Just this one. But it was enough. I was frozen in place, trying to comprehend what I was reading. The kids? Ethan didn't have children, at least, not with me. But my mind raced as the dots began to connect. I had always suspected that Ethan was acting distant lately, but I never imagined it would be anything like this. I opened the message. The next one from Claire was even more intimate. I love you so much. Can't wait to be with you again this weekend. The kids will be thrilled. The mention of the kids sent a chill down my spine. Ethan was a father? I had no idea. My heart pounded as I continued to scroll through the conversation. There were several photos. Photos I couldn't bear to look at first, but I forced myself to see them. The first was of a little boy, no older than 4, sitting on Ethan's lap, smiling up at him. The second was of a girl, perhaps 6 years old, with dark curly hair, standing beside him in what looked like a living room. They were laughing, their eyes filled with joy. These were Ethan's children, and they were real. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My husband, my seemingly devoted husband, had been living a double life. I felt like the room was spinning, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. My pulse quickened as I reread the messages. Ethan had been seeing this woman, Claire, for what seemed like years, and he had 2 children with her. The pain was overwhelming. How could he do this to me? How could he hide something so monumental? My mind raced with questions, but none of them made sense. I tried to breathe, to steady myself, but it was impossible. I stood there holding the phone, shaking. How long had this been going on? Were there more secrets I didn't know about? Had I really been living in a marriage where one of us was living a lie? I couldn't process it all at once, and yet I couldn't stop myself from going deeper. I clicked on the next message, a photo of a house. It wasn't extravagant, but it was cozy and clearly lived in. Claire had sent it to Ethan with the caption, "I've been looking at houses for us. I think we should move to something bigger next year, when the kids start school. What do you think?" The words felt like a punch to my stomach. Ethan was planning a future with Claire. They had talked about moving in together. They had talked about the kids starting school. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. But instead, I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling as I stared at the screen. This was the man I had married, the man I trusted. But this man had been living a lie, betraying me every single day. I heard the sound of the front door closing as Ethan walked in. He must have been home for a while, but I hadn't noticed. I felt a sudden wave of anger rise up inside me. How could he just walk in here as if everything was fine? How could he pretend like nothing was wrong? I didn't look at him at first. I couldn't. My mind was too overwhelmed by the discovery, and I needed a moment to collect myself. But then I heard his voice, soft, apologetic, as he entered the living room. "Hey babe. I'm sorry I'm late. I was caught up with work. How was your day?" I didn't answer him. I just looked at him. And then I looked down at the phone. He froze when he saw the expression on my face. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice quiet, but his face betraying his guilt. I couldn't speak. I just handed him the phone. "You should look at this," I said, my voice trembling. Ethan took the phone from me, and as soon as he saw the messages, his face went pale. "Claire," he whispered, almost as if he were trying to deny it. But he couldn't. The evidence was right there in front of him. I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment crash down on me. "How long, Ethan? How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice rising in a mix of anger and pain. I never meant for it to happen," he stammered, looking at the floor. "I didn't plan this, I swear. It was a mistake. Just happened. I'm sorry, please. I never wanted to hurt you." The apology felt empty. His words were hollow, and I could tell he was trying to make it sound like something he regretted. But how could he regret something he had been doing for years? How could he apologize when he had been living a separate life with a woman and children I knew nothing about? "I can't believe this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been lying to me for years. How could you do this to me, Ethan?" "I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted you to find out like this," he said, looking at me with wide eyes. "I love you, but I love her too. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so sorry." I shook my head, tears threatening to spill from my eyes. This wasn't the man I had married. This wasn't the life I had signed up for. I wanted to scream at him, to demand that he explain himself. But I knew that nothing he said would make this hurt less. In that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I had been living a lie, and it was a lie that I couldn't unsee. The reality of my marriage had shattered, and I had no idea what to do next. The silence in the room was unbearable. My mind was racing, trying to piece together everything I had just discovered. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I couldn't. I felt paralyzed, like I was trapped in my own body, unable to move, unable to think clearly. My chest felt tight, my heart pounding painfully in my ears. How was it possible? How could Ethan, the man I had loved and trusted for so long, have kept this secret from me? I had always believed our marriage was strong, that we had built something real, something unbreakable. But now, in the space of just a few moments, all of that had crumbled. Ethan stood there, frozen in the doorway, still holding the phone in his trembling hands. He looked like a man caught in the act, his face pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and guilt. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't see the man I knew. The man who always knew how to make me laugh, who was there for me in every moment of joy and sorrow. All I saw now was a stranger. Someone who had lied to me. Someone who had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, confusion, disbelief. I couldn't think clearly. But one thing was certain, I needed answers. I needed to know how long this had been going on. How he could stand there in front of me and pretend everything was fine, when he had been living a double life. Finally I spoke, my voice shaking with the weight of my emotions. "How long, Ethan? How long has this been going on?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the phone, his eyes darting between the screen and me, as if he were trying to figure out how to make sense of the situation. His silence was unbearable. It felt like a betrayal in itself. I wasn't asking for some long-winded explanation or an excuse. I just wanted the truth. "Ethan," I said, my voice firmer this time. "How long?" He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing nervously as he took a step toward me. His eyes were filled with desperation. But I didn't care about his desperation. Not right now. Not when my entire world had been turned upside down. I didn't mean for it to happen, okay? He finally muttered, his voice barely audible. It just happened. I didn't plan it. I never intended for this to happen. I could feel my anger bubbling up inside me. You didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, incredulity dripping from my words. Do you hear yourself? You're telling me you didn't mean to have an entire second life? You didn't mean to have 2 children with another woman? How does that even make sense, Ethan? I know it doesn't make sense, he said quickly, his voice cracking. I know it sounds terrible, but I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. I didn't know what to do. It just got out of control. I wanted to laugh bitterly at his words. Of course, he didn't know what to do. He had made a mess of everything. And now he was trying to justify it with a poor excuse. He wasn't even trying to make it sound believable. But it wasn't about the excuse, was it? It was about the betrayal. It was about the lies he had told me every single day. You think you didn't hurt me? I said, my voice low, almost dangerously calm. How long have you been seeing her, Ethan? How long have you been lying to me? He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for the right words. But there were no right words. There was no justification. There was no excuse for what he had done. Finally, he let out a long, shaky breath. About 5 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 5 years. 5 years of secrets, of lies. 5 years of me, his wife, living in the dark while he built a family with someone else. The weight of that number hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear in my head was the sound of that number echoing over and over again. I've been seeing Claire for that long, he continued, his eyes pleading for my understanding. I never planned for it to happen. It just happened. I met her and we connected. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. You're telling me you've been living with her, building a family, and you never meant for it to go this far? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Do you really think I'm that stupid, Ethan? Do you really think I'm going to believe that? He took a step closer, his hands outstretched as if trying to calm me down. But his touch felt foreign to me now, like it belonged to someone else. I never wanted to hurt you, he repeated, his voice breaking. I love you, but I love her too. I didn't know what to do. I'm so sorry. I don't know how it all got so complicated. Complicated? I echoed, my voice rising in anger. This isn't complicated, Ethan. This is simple. You lied to me for 5 years. You cheated on me. You had children with another woman. You have been living a double life and you thought you could get away with it. How could you do this to me? I didn't think I'd get caught, he admitted, his voice trembling. I thought I could keep it hidden. I thought I could manage both of you. But it was getting harder. And now it's all coming apart. I never wanted it to be like this. I'm sure you didn't, I said bitterly, but here we are. You've torn everything apart, Ethan. You've torn me apart. I trusted you with everything. I gave you my love, my time, my loyalty. And this is how you repay me. I know, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I know I've messed up. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please just give me a chance to explain. I never meant for it to get this bad. I don't want to lose you. You've already lost me, I said, my words like a slap. The finality in my voice surprised even me. You lost me the moment you decided to lie to me. You lost me the moment you decided to have another family behind my back. Ethan's face crumpled. His eyes filled with tears. And for a brief moment, I saw the man I had once known. The man I had loved. But it wasn't enough anymore. The damage was done. The lies had taken their toll. And nothing he said could take away the pain. I never wanted to hurt you, he repeated. But I could hear the desperation in his voice now. Please, just let me try to make this right. I'll do anything. I'll leave her. I'll tell her the truth. I'll cut ties with her if you want me to. Please don't leave me. Leave her. I said, my voice sharp. What about the children, Ethan? Are you going to walk away from them too? You've built a life with her. You've built a family. You can't just erase that because you're feeling guilty now. He flinched at my words, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. I never wanted it to go this far, he said again, his voice barely audible. I know, I said, my tone cold. But it did. And now you have to live with the consequences. I turned away from him, walking toward the window. I didn't want to look at him anymore. I couldn't. I needed time to process everything that had happened. But more than that, I needed to get away from him. I needed to breathe, to think clearly. I had given him everything, and now he had shattered everything I believed in. I don't know what to do, he said, his voice faint. I love you, I swear I do. But I don't want to lose her either. I don't want to hear it, Ethan, I snapped, my voice sharp and final. You made your choice. And now you have to live with it. Don't come back to me. Don't ask me for forgiveness. I'm done. I could feel his presence behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't bear to see the man who had betrayed me. I didn't want to hear any more of his excuses. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. Please, he whispered again, but I said nothing. I didn't even acknowledge him. I just stood there, staring out the window, my mind swirling with everything I had just learned. My life had been built on a lie, and I didn't know how to begin putting the pieces back together. And in that moment, I realized something profound. I was no longer the woman who had been married to Ethan. That woman no longer existed. The woman I had been was gone, replaced by someone new, someone stronger, someone who wouldn't settle for lies. The days after the confrontation felt like a blur. I spent my time in a haze of disbelief, unable to escape the reality of what Ethan had done. The man I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had been living a lie for 5 years. And now, everything was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I couldn't stay in the apartment. It felt tainted, suffocating. Every corner seemed to whisper the lies he had told. Every surface reminded me of the life we had shared. The memories, once precious, had turned into weapons that now cut me deeper than any betrayal could. I found myself going through the motions of everyday life, but I was empty inside. I avoided Ethan's calls and texts, too angry, too hurt to even consider speaking to him. I couldn't face him. Not yet. Not after everything he had done. I was angry, no, furious, at him, at the situation, at the fact that I had been made a fool of for so long. But there was something else inside me. Something I couldn't quite name. Something that gnawed at me in the darkest hours of the night. It was the other woman. The one Ethan had been seeing all these years. The one I didn't even know existed until recently. Claire. I didn't know anything about her except what I had seen in the messages on Ethan's phone. I knew she had 2 children, and I knew she had been with Ethan while I had been sitting here, believing our marriage was solid. I knew she was in love with him. Ethan had made that abundantly clear. And in some strange way, I felt a mixture of compassion and disdain for her. I wasn't sure if I hated her, or if I felt sorry for her. But what hurt the most was that, for all the pain Ethan had caused me, I had been living in ignorance while she had been living in a truth that was also built on lies. I felt a need, a burning compulsion, to make her see what was really happening. I didn't want to be just the woman left behind. I wanted to be the one who spoke the truth, who exposed the reality of what Ethan had done to both of us. That evening, after another long day of avoiding Ethan's calls, I sat on the couch in our apartment, staring at my phone. His name flashed on the screen, the familiar contact picture of him smiling at me from a vacation we had taken years ago. My chest tightened, and I quickly dismissed the call. I couldn't speak to him. Not now. I had to think, to plan. I needed to take control of this situation because, for the first time in years, I felt powerless. And I hated it. I opened up the messages again, scrolling through the conversations Ethan had shared with Claire. I studied the words carefully, the sweetness and the familiarity between them. I didn't recognize any of it. It felt like a life I didn't belong to, a world I had been shut out of. But it wasn't just his lies that cut me. It was the thought that Claire, too, was being deceived. That she believed in him the way I once had. That she had been living a version of truth that was completely fabricated. A wave of something unexpected washed over me. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a desire for clarity. It was a desire to put an end to the secrecy. To make sure Claire knew the truth about Ethan and the life he had been hiding from her. I didn't want her to be part of this lie anymore. I didn't want her to think she was the only one. Ethan was mine first. And even though it was over between us, there was something in me that felt a need to claim that truth. I had always been a person of integrity, someone who believed in honesty and communication. So I thought, why not be the one to show her? To expose the truth for what it was, rather than letting Ethan continue to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. I didn't care about the pain it might cause. If anything, I thought it might be the only thing left that could give me some sense of control in this chaotic situation. After a few moments of contemplation, I found Claire's contact information on the phone. It was almost surreal, like I was stepping into a different life. A life where I didn't belong but was now suddenly thrust into. My hands shook as I tapped the message icon and opened up a new conversation. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could I possibly say to her? What did I even want to say? There were so many emotions swirling in my chest: betrayal, anger, sadness, but I knew I had to be clear. I needed to be honest. I typed the message slowly, carefully. I had to make sure I wasn't being overly dramatic or too harsh. I didn't want to come off as vindictive, but I didn't want her to misunderstand the severity of the situation. This wasn't just a little affair. This was 5 years of lies. This was a family that had been built on deceit. I'm Ethan's wife. These are our wedding photos, I typed, my finger hovering over the send button. I attached a few photos from our wedding day, the ones that had once felt so full of love, now tainted by the truth. Ethan and I had been happy back then, at least I thought we had been. But now I realized those moments were just a mask for the life he had been secretly living. I clicked send before I could second-guess myself. It didn't take long for the reply to come through. I had expected something. Perhaps a defensive response, maybe even disbelief. But I wasn't prepared for the calmness in her words. When the notification popped up on my phone, I opened it immediately. I had no idea. Her message read, I thought we were building something real. I didn't know he was married. I didn't know any of this. The words stung in a way I didn't anticipate. Here she was, just like me, discovering the truth. I could almost feel the confusion and hurt that must have flooded over her as she read the message. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want her to feel betrayed like I had. But there was no way around it. This was the reality, the truth. I took a deep breath before I responded. I'm sorry that you had to find out this way. But you deserve to know the truth. Ethan has been married to me for 8 years. And he has been seeing you for 5. I don't know what he's told you. But I wanted you to know that I didn't have a choice but to tell you. I don't know what he told you about me. But I think we both deserve better than this. There was a long pause after that. I couldn't imagine what was going through her mind. The silence felt oppressive. I wondered if she would even respond, or if she would ignore me completely. Maybe she would be angry. Maybe she would blame me for tearing her world apart. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew that in some way, I had done the right thing. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about getting back at Ethan or Claire. It was about the truth. Finally, her reply came. Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry you're going through this. I can't believe this is happening. I had no idea he was married. I don't know how to feel right now. I'm just shocked. Her message was simple, but it hit me harder than I expected. She didn't blame me. She wasn't angry with me. She was just as much a victim in this as I was. And for a brief moment, I felt a sense of solidarity with her. We were both tangled in Ethan's web of lies. And even though we were strangers, we shared this painful connection. I'm sorry too, I typed back. I don't know how to fix this, but I wanted you to know. I just hope we can both move forward from this, whatever that looks like. I'm done with him. And I hope you find the strength to move forward as well. There was a long pause before she replied again. Thank you for being honest. I don't know what the future holds, but I appreciate the truth. Take care of yourself. And that was it. The conversation ended there. It was strange, in a way, to know that our connection, this bizarre shared experience of betrayal and heartbreak, had been reduced to a few messages. But in some way, I felt lighter after it was over. The weight of the secret had been lifted. For once, there was no more hiding, no more deceit. It was just the truth, raw and painful, but finally out in the open. Ethan called me a few times that night, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had done what I needed to do. I had made sure Claire knew the truth. And now it was up to her what to do with it. As for me, I wasn't ready to speak to Ethan. I wasn't ready to hear any more of his apologies or excuses. The lies were done. The truth was out there. The next few days passed slowly, each one filled with a mixture of anger, sadness, and numbness. I didn't know what was next for me, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Ethan or anyone else dictate my life anymore. I had taken control, and for the first time since I had discovered his betrayal, I felt like I was starting to regain my power. It was only the beginning, but it was enough. The weeks following that fateful message to Claire were filled with a mix of disbelief and acceptance. It felt as though the world around me had been shaken, and then, after a brief pause, everything had settled back into place with a new kind of clarity. I had always thought that knowing the truth would provide relief, but it didn't work that way. Instead, it felt as though I was walking through a fog of uncertainty, the old parts of my life falling away like fragments of glass. I had no idea how to start over. Everything I had built for the last decade had been a lie, and now I was left with the shards trying to piece together something new. It had been 2 weeks since I had sent that message to Claire, and I still hadn't spoken to Ethan. He tried to contact me repeatedly, leaving me countless voicemails, sending endless texts, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I knew the conversation we had would not be one that could fix anything. It would only deepen the wound. I had thought about leaving the apartment, about moving away, and starting fresh somewhere where no one knew my name, where I wouldn't have to see his face again. But that idea felt impossible. The apartment was too familiar, and despite everything, I didn't want to leave. It was the place where I had built my life, where I had hoped for a future with Ethan. It was also a place where I needed closure, a place that I had to reclaim for myself before I could move on. I spent most of my days avoiding the thought of Ethan. Every corner of our home reminded me of him, the photograph of our wedding on the mantel, the shared books we had bought together, the kitchen where we had cooked countless meals, laughing, talking about everything and nothing. All of it felt like a cruel joke now. But the hardest part of all was the realization that I had no idea who he really was. The man I had spent so many years with, the man I had trusted, loved, and believed in, had been a stranger to me all along. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling mindlessly through social media, I saw a post that caught my eye. It was Claire. Her profile picture showed her standing with Ethan and their 2 children. She had tagged him, the caption reading, "My whole world." It stung in a way I hadn't expected. My chest tightened as I stared at the photo. There they were, a family built on the same lies that had wrecked mine. But it wasn't just the photo that caught my attention. It was the message below, the words she had written in response to the post. It was as if she had read my message to her, understood my pain, and was now living a version of it herself. "I never wanted this," she had written. "But I have to face it. The truth is hard, but I can't ignore it anymore. I deserve more than this." I blinked at the words, surprised at the sense of solidarity that suddenly washed over me. Despite everything, I realized Claire and I shared something deep and painful. We had both been deceived, both had loved the same man, both had believed in his lies. We had both given him the best parts of ourselves, and in return, he had betrayed us both. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, far from it, but there was a quiet understanding that I was not the only one who had been destroyed by this. Ethan had ruined both of our lives, and now we had to pick up the pieces alone. A few days later, Claire sent me a message. This time, it was a simple hi followed by a few lines of text. "I know this isn't the right time to ask, but I've been thinking about everything that happened. I'm so sorry for what you've gone through. I don't want any more lies in my life, and I think it's time for me to confront him too. I don't know what the future holds for me or the kids, but I need to ask. How are you holding up? Are you doing okay?" Her words were kind, understanding, and filled with a sense of mutual respect that I hadn't expected. It was as if she, too, was trying to make sense of the wreckage we had both been left with. I hesitated for a moment before typing my response. I wasn't sure what to say, but I knew I wanted to be honest with her. Despite everything, I had no desire to hurt her. We were both victims of the same betrayal. "I'm not okay," I wrote back. "But I'm getting there. Slowly. I don't know if I'll ever be okay with what happened, but I'm trying to move forward. I hope you can do the same. I'm sorry for what you're going through too." There was no immediate reply. I didn't expect one. I wasn't sure if there was anything more to say between us, but a small part of me felt a sense of solidarity in our shared pain. We were two women who had both been deceived, both discarded by the same man. And somehow that connection, however strange, gave me a small amount of comfort. It wasn't that I wished her harm. Quite the opposite. I just wished both of us could escape the emotional prison that Ethan had built around us. As the days went on, I found myself thinking less about Ethan and more about what came next. I had been stuck in the past for so long, replaying the same memories, trying to figure out when things had gone wrong. But I had finally come to terms with the fact that I couldn't change what had happened. What mattered now was what I chose to do with my future. I wasn't going to let Ethan's mistakes dictate my life. He had taken enough from me. It was time to take back control. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the pain of betrayal still hit me like a physical blow. And there were nights when I would wake up in the middle of the night, unable to shake the image of Ethan's face, filled with guilt and shame, but over time, the weight of it all began to lift. I realized I wasn't the same person I had been when I first found out about the affair. I was stronger now, more resilient. I had learned that my worth was not defined by Ethan's actions or by the lies he had told. One day, as I was sitting in a cafe, sipping coffee and reading a book, I saw something that made me pause. It was a message from Ethan. His words were short but powerful. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need you to know something. I'm sorry. I've lost everything that mattered to me, and I will never forgive myself for what I've done. I wish I could change things, but I can't. Please, I hope you find happiness, even if it's without me." It was a confession I had longed to hear, but in that moment it felt hollow. There were no words that could undo the pain he had caused, no apology that could make up for the years of lies. I stared at the message for a long time, before I put my phone down and took a deep breath. I had already made my peace with what had happened. Ethan's apology didn't change anything. It didn't change the fact that our marriage was over. It didn't change the truth that he had betrayed me. And yet something in me stirred. It was closure. It was the final step I needed in order to move on. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't hate him. I had come to understand that the only person who could heal the wound he had left was me. I had to let go of him, of the life we had once shared, and start building something new. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. I spent time with friends and family, rediscovered old passions, and slowly started rebuilding my life. I focused on my career, took up new hobbies, and traveled to places I had always wanted to visit. I even started dating again, something I never thought would happen so soon. But most importantly, I learned to trust myself again. I realized I didn't need anyone to define me. I was enough on my own. As for Ethan, I eventually heard that he and Claire had broken up. She had told him the truth about her decision to leave him, and in a strange way, I felt a sense of solidarity with her. Both of us had given him our trust, our hearts, and he had shattered both. But now we were both free. And in that freedom I found peace. The story of Ethan and his double life had come to an end, and so had mine. But the future was mine to shape, and I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. It had hurt deeply, but I had survived. I had grown. And as I looked ahead, I realized that the best was yet to come. The chapter with Ethan had closed. And now a new story was beginning, one where I was the author.